down, so,
Sullivan side.
yeah,
Still says.
just for space.
But that lady, she was saying, she said, I never did
I might-
have
I need to
him,
get
but
up.
I knew him.
Oh, so she was,
And
would have been
she
a
was-
possible student of mine.
She was,
I keep
she
forgetting.
said she went to ETSU,
We need to get,
to nursing,
that's a lot of things that need
but she
to,
was married and everything.
that's, as soon as we get past this and get on footing to,
Late, you get to the other table.
We'll see which way the offering plate goes.
There you go.
Matthew Price up here.
So we are gonna be facing this way for just a minute.
I get you early, so I'm putting back to the wall.
I saw a red dot a minute ago. I know it was from me.
What was it called, the?
I used to have one of those things at work and that fired me. If it come out, I had more fun out of that thing. Those little red dot things. I had a couple people paranoid anyway.
Good evening. I guess we'll call this meeting to order. Special call meeting. I'm going to just go ahead and turn it straight over to Mr. Carter.
Good afternoon. Welcome, everybody. We have two items really on our agenda this evening. The first one is concerning a change order on the West Ridge Access Road. The goal is that we are kicking off and getting underway on the 13th. And so to accomplish that, this change order need to be decided on before we have the on-site pre-construction meeting on Monday there. So we have representatives here from Baker Construction. I'm going to turn it over to Kevin. That's right, Kevin Buck. I'm going to turn it over to Kevin, and they have a visual up here on the screen. If everybody'd like to turn their attention to there, and I'll just turn it over to you at this time, Kevin.
Thank you, sir. Kevin Buck with Baker's Construction Services. We bid the project, whenever that was, a few weeks ago. And it bid, this is what it looked like when we bid it. The yellow are areas that are kind of close to grade. The magenta areas are cut areas, and the cyan areas are fill areas. You can see that the magenta areas are overwhelming. And there was a lot, and the project consisted of a lot of material that had to be hauled off site. We proposed to leave it on site, stacking it on the hill there, a slope coming the same slope as off the pond, and even with a little, it's got a little flattish area on top, but the drainage doesn't change. We're draining the water into the same pond that it was going in before. And to that end, we can offer a credit for the project. You can see, this is what the project looks like in 3D. You can see the hillside on the left there. New pad, parking lot.
So Kevin, the area where Jaren was at right there, that's the future parking lot,
Yes,
that flat area there.
right there, yes.
And then there's a little valley.
There, yeah, we've left a swale between the
So it
toe of the
goes down
slope
to
and
the-
that parking lot, so that the drainage area that was draining through there anyway still has a direct line to the pond.
And then the teal blue, whatever color it is, that,
Yes.
that's
That's the
where.
fill, that is the excess material from the project, just
And then it-
stacked on the slope,
And
yes.
then on the next view of it, that becomes all 2-to-1 grade.
Yes,
and
two
a
to one
flat.
on the bottom, you can see the contours in the line work there. The 2-to-1 slope down to the bottom, and then a little bit of where the contours are farther apart, that's a flatter area on top, and it may have some use.
Will this be seeded when it's finished?
It will be seeded and totally restored. Topsoil seed,
And the change order creates approximately 153,000, is that correct?
yeah, 153,000 and some change, I can't remember. I think so. There's some illusion of precision
153,
there.
196.
Yes, there's an illusion of precision there.
And one of the nice things that I thought was important to mention is, and I didn't realize we were gonna be talking about this many loads of dirt, but we're talking about somewhere around 3,100 to 3,200, Steve, is that right?
That's right.
Of trucks going in and back and forth on our roads there. dirt, mud, and then that much traffic on those roads as well, so I think that's
Not,
substantial.
not just traffic, but dump truck
Dump
traffic.
trucks, right, dump
Yes.
trucks. So the wear and tear on our roads for that.
Probably repaving them
It won't help it any, that's for sure. Heavy dump trucks. And just the, they won't be able to control the mud on their tires and stuff as they're going in and out, so I thought it was a good offer. Makes more mowing space afterward, basically. But,
Increase our,
yeah, that was pushing it, closer to September, maybe. Y'all even mentioned August.
Whichever is gonna be better than time to take a haul off the highway.
Any other questions, Kevin? Or I thought that was neat. That's a Jeep that they got on
So
there.
you can drive down the road,
Drive
Jerry.
it down. You wanna take them down the new access road, Jared?
Let's take them down and show them the culvert down at the bottom. This is the same technology we use in our equipment. So the guys in the field, the guys on the dozers and in the excavators, they're seeing the same picture. And they see, they see on the right, you see on the right, it's top corner up there. It tells what work you're doing. Hit home. And they can see from the corner how much work they've got to do in that area from where they are. And just for the record, we appreciate getting to work with the school and looking forward to a great project.
Any questions?
Is that your recommendation?
That'd be my recommendation, is that we accept the change order, and allow, Baker's Construction to leave the dirt on site with the understanding that at the end, they're going to level it off, make a usable space, seed it, and have it ready for us to go.
I'll make the motion that we accept your recommendation.
I'll second.
Motion by Mr. Jones and second by Ms. Stanley.
Mr. Hughes,
Yes.
Mr. Jones,
Yes.
Mr. Price,
Yes.
Mr. Robinson,
Yes.
Dr. Rouse,
Yes.
Mr. Spivey,
Yes.
Ms. Stanley,
Yes.
Thank you. Thank you all. Now, if y'all want to stay for our budget meeting, you're more than welcome.
That's what we're living for.
Thank y'all.
As we begin this, we do have 4 microphones on the table today, and Mr. Maynard's checked them. I believe everybody's voice will pick up if you have anything. It's just, you'll want to speak up a little bit because we do only have 4. And he wanted me to kind of mention that to everybody. But anything else before we start? We good? I think Mr. Loach has prepared a PowerPoint that she's going to present, and we can stop as we go and answer any questions, or we can go through it and then answer questions at the end, so.
get off that screen quickly so you can't see all my messages. So you should have on your desk or your table a copy of the PowerPoint presentation and a copy of the budgets. I think Mr. Carter shared with you a copy of the PowerPoint presentation and the budgets earlier this week. There have been a couple of slight changes. I was able to identify an error in our system and change those numbers just a little bit, but the overall is pretty much the same. So if you compare those, you're going to see just a little bit of a change in the numbers. There's about $20,000 difference in the numbers. You'll see that. But mainly it's the same thing, and that was just an error that we found luckily before we presented the budget. And I think he just shared with you the general purpose budget. I think that's our main focus tonight. There's not anything we can do about the federal budgets, the school nutrition budget, or the Discovery Academy budgets, but our main focus will be the general purpose budget tonight. To get started, I'll start with the revenues for 24-25. We were given revenue projections by the County Finance Department, and those projections reflect a $1.3 million cut in local revenues. Local revenues are mainly made up of property tax and sales tax. You can see that the property tax projection is down $365,000, and the local option sales tax is down $579,000. Overall, it was $1.3 million.
And on the screen up there, there is in red that you can't see on your black and white copies there, so that they can't reflect that if they need to know or if there's anything.
It is hard to see on that screen, but I think I changed them to white for you.
Oh. well,
His copy that I gave him earlier today was black and white, and it was red, and I noticed
you.
that it was hard to see on his copy, so I've
Good.
switched them to white real quick. So that's the local revenues. We lost 1.3. The other big component of our revenues is TISA. We have received the April estimate for TISA, and it is just an estimate. That will change before we get the final, but the April estimate was $51,570,000 for TISA. In this April estimate, they gave us a hold harmless for the economically disadvantaged students, and that's a great thing. If we had to use the actual number for 24-25, we would have seen a loss, a tremendous loss. And thanks to the Superintendent's Study Council making that known to everybody, because everybody across the state would have received that loss, they changed it and gave us a hold harmless. So that's a benefit that we have in this TISA formula. However, next year, I doubt we're going to have that hold harmless clause in there. This estimate does not include any outcomes allocation, and they won't. TISA never does that. Those will be done at the end of next school year. So we don't budget for those because we have no idea what those are going to be because they don't do them until the end of the school year. It does reflect an increase of $1.1 million over what we had budgeted for 23-24. And of that $1.1 million, they restrict out $1,008,000 just for educator salaries. Now to go into our expenditure increases. As you requested, we have reflected a 15% raise for all of our employees with the exception of ROTC and substitutes. Our ROTC instructors, their salary is set by the federal government, and they receive cost of living allocations yearly. They are already above our salary scales for our teachers, so I made the executive decision to keep them out of that. Our substitutes received a large increase with last year's budget, and they got that last year, or this current year that we're in. This budget proposal also includes longevity steps for all of our employees. You implemented that when you did the new salary scales. We had lots of assistants who didn't get longevity steps, but now they do. So all of our employees get steps now. We have requested an insurance rate quote, and we can't get that till June. So we have figured a 5% insurance increase as of January the 1st. That's when our rate will change, but the benefits office could not give us an estimate until they think probably June, if not late this month, early June. Part of this budget includes moving 2 school secretaries to full-time. We only have a part-time secretary at Central Heights Elementary School and a part-time secretary at Sullivan Gardens Elementary School. This proposal would move those to full-time positions. We added the 2 JAG instructors that you approved a couple of months back. Again, that just includes a $7,000 contribution for those 2 instructors. So we get 2 instructors for $14,000. We're also going to add a health science teacher at East High School, but that will be funded through the ISM grant. So we didn't have to pay for an increase there. But as that grant continues, we have to start contributing a percentage for 2, 3, and 4, I think, years 2, 3, and 4. But this year, it's fully funded with ISM. We have added 1 coordinator position for here at central office. That person would be in charge of public relations and recruitment. We have increased trustees commission. That is a fee that the trustees office is allowed to collect on any fees that she collects. She can charge that commission. And we've seen that increasing slightly, so we have increased trustees' commission. We also increased the line item for liability insurances, and you've heard this before when I come to you with a budget presentation. That premium continues to increase. We saw almost $150,000 worth of an increase for this year, and we don't anticipate that to change in any year future. So we increased liability insurances there, and we also added for cyber insurance. That is something that we have been suggested to get, and we've put it in this budget. We increased for student behavior contracts. Currently, we have to pay for facilities that house our students for behavior issues. And what the state sets the rate for that, and that rate is continuing to climb, and unfortunately, utilization is continuing to increase. So we had to increase that line item. If you recall back to last year, I believe it was, we were able to get a grant through the health department to buy all new AEDs for our schools, which was a tremendous improvement. We had some AEDs that were getting ready to phase out, and you don't want to have an AED that's not good. It's too late when you find out that that's not going to be possible. So we bought 58 AEDs with that grant, and that didn't cost us anything. We just got 58 AEDs. However, those 58 AEDs are all going to phase out at the same time. They have an 8 to 10 year lifespan. So what I have proposed and put in this budget is to replace 8 to 10 a year. And to get that to where when we get to that mark, when they're starting to expire, we can already start rolling them through, and we don't have to purchase 58 AEDs at one time. We also put in for the electronic medical records for our nurses. That was funded through the grant as well through the health department, but that grant is no longer available. So we need to provide that electronic medical record access for our nurses. This allows them to not have to do a piece of paper to chart all their stuff. It allows Diane to have access to everything that happens. We have lots of reporting options, and we don't have to track a piece of paper all through the year to figure out where it goes. It's a big deal for the nurses, and that's included in this budget. We also increased for the mowing contract that you approved last meeting. That's included in this. We increased for the usual increase in utilities. And also included in your budget is an increase for an additional pre-K class that we hope to have at Sullivan Gardens. The state approved that through a grant, through the pre-K grant, so it won't be any cost to us. We just don't have the final number from the state, so we've estimated that. It will be offset by an increase in the revenue. As far as cuts, we have cut 5 professional positions through attrition and 5 support staff positions through attrition. We tried to look at all positions and make sure that if anybody was retiring or leaving us and we could make room for that somewhere else, we did that. Those positions were made, those cuts were made without anyone losing their job. In the 23-24 budget, we had put in there if we wanted to replace our bus fleet or if we wanted to add on to our bus fleet. We had put money in there for that. I don't believe we're at that point that we need to continue that, so that was removed from the budget. The 23-24 year, we paid off the East Roof capital note, so that payment was able to be removed from the budget. And now all we have is the EESI debt that's still out there. And Mr. Steffi was able to cut the TransFinder subscription, which was our routing software that we were never able to utilize. He was able to cut that out of his budget, so that was removed from the budget as well. I'll keep going or I'll stop for questions, however you want to do it.
Taking notes for questions.
Okay, if you want to do questions at the end, that's fine too. So the next slide, it shows our total budget for 24-25. That's $97,670,414. As you know, the state requires that we maintain 3% of our fund balance if we want to budget out of the fund balance to balance our budget. That is not a suggested fund balance level. That's just a requirement if you want to use fund balance to balance your budget. So if you take what our fund balance was on July the 1st of this past year, because we don't know what it is as of today because we haven't closed out. But if you take that, that's $25,490,000. You take out what we budgeted for 23-24 because it's not available yet, $259, and you take out what we've used to balance the budget for this proposal, $350,000. and then you take out what we spent this year out of fund balance, $9.6 million. That gets us to $15.2 million. So we obviously meet the 3% requirement.
That's the available amount.
That's right. $15 million is available right now
That's the available amount.
in undesignated fund balance.
Does that 9.6 million include the money that we set aside for cash flow?
Federal projects cash flow, it sure does.
That money is still ours, it's just a matter of,
It is, but it's tied up right now and it's in federal projects fund. If that ever comes back, it'll add to your fund balance undesignated, but right now it's designated and gone to federal projects. I believe that was $1.8 million that we transferred over.
I want to point out that was a difference what we talked about last month.
Yep,
Because we were just about-
it is, and that's my fault, because I reviewed your list and thought we were fine, and I didn't notice that until I went back to look at my resolutions, and I'd prepared that resolution for $1.8 million. I totally forgot about it. It seems like that's been decades ago, and I know it hadn't been, but it, for some reason.
I forgot about it too.
What is it?
It's,
In the nine? Okay.
that's part of it.
It's included in that $9 million.
It's still ours, it's committed to the cash flow.
So you really can't use it.
Can't use it, what it comes down to, but I had forgotten about it when I gave that sheet out last month.
I got you.
So if you take our revenues and what we take out of fund balance to balance or somewhat balance the budget, and you minus out our expenditures, that leaves us with a request for funding at $7.8 million.
You want to go first? I got a couple of questions.
Okay?
I'll go from the back, maybe. Remind me of the price of the east roof per year. It's been a while, is it 4?
170,000, I think.
Let's see here.
Per year?
Yeah, that should be about
It-
right.
it and something else equaled 412, something else we were paying.
440 is the EESI. We pay $440,000 a year for the EESI payment, Energy Efficient School Initiatives payment.
So that 170's,
That's what we paid out.
it's back in budget. What was the actual increase in insurance? What we realized last year? Just
2.5, I believe.
2.5. So we're good with 5 probably.
I think we should be good with 5. Now, they could completely shock us and come back with 7, 8, 9, 10, who knows? But I think we should be pretty good with 5.
Sometimes insurance will do that, won't it?
Mm-hmm.
So you can't go by last year, you got to add some. Right?
You really have to, it's year to year, just depends on what kind of claims they've experienced across the state. And where we have state insurance, it's not just our district that it's going off of, it's the whole state.
When you're talking about outcome allocations, this TISA is a little bit new for me. We're talking about those determinations which increased that original amount, which was 6,800, which is now 7,100. So for example, somebody that had dyslexia or something like that, that would be an outcome thing that would increase that. Or
That's
not.
a unique learning need.
Okay.
Outcomes and unique learning needs are two different things. They can go with the unique learning needs because that's reported each month with our attendance reports. That's reported. However, outcomes is more like dual enrollment certifications for CTE, ACT scores, yeah, things like that. So you don't know it until you get to the end of the year because you don't know what you have. And there's no way to really predict that from one year to the next. You're going to kind of know. We will, because we kind of know where our kids are. But at this point, we don't really know because we don't know who's going to finish the year strong.
So with
That makes sense?
if a student reaches an outcome this year, we'll realize it next year, and then that student's off the chart. If they're a sophomore and they reach that 21 on the ACT, we'll get an outcome one time for that student. But if they do dual enrollment the next year, we don't get another outcome for that student. Each student's entitled to, I guess you'd say, one outcome. So those are one-time deals for each student that we can give.
And that's one of the places we've seen the state kind of tinker with TISA. Not that they're changing the rules, but they change the rules. I don't know how else to say it. That's how they tinker it. And I couldn't guarantee you what it's going to be next year because we've already seen change in this year's numbers, what they actually count for an outcome. So I think it's best to not even try to guess at that because you don't really know what the students are going to do, but you also don't know what the state's going to do.
Last question I have is, you may not know the answer to, we were discussing it. The value of a penny went from 4.13 and change to 4.06 and change. And we determined that that was because the overall assessment had went down. Do you have an explanation for how that happened? Because to the common person, it would seem that the
I would think the only way that could have happened is if they approved a TIF or something like that, that it would reduce the assessments that we can collect taxes on. Because you have to take the TIFs out of that when you calculate the value of a penny. So if there was a TIF that was approved that may have changed that total assessment, I could see that happening.
Where would that show up and where would somebody like me find that?
Yeah, the property assessor should be able to tell you what TIFs we have out there.
What size TIF would that take? Pretty good size, wouldn't it? That would be a big TIF, wouldn't it?
I would think, it'd probably be multiple, I would think, or a really big one.
Thank you.
Did you see that one down at, West Side Inn? For the car lot?
And Ms. Stanley, I think those are approved by the county commission, is that correct?
Yes,
Say that again.
they're approved through the county commission. Do you have a number on how much it's gonna be for the 15% raise for the teachers?
It was approximately $9 million.
Not me.
I've got
That's for all employees, Ms. Stanley, that's not just teachers, that's for all employees.
I've got a couple of suggestions or questions that I'd like to ask. If we can move some money into a restricted reserve account, it would help us with what we need to balance this budget. And there are several items in our budget that I think we could do that with. For example, textbooks, $850,000. Transportation equipment and maintenance vehicles, there's a couple of line items showing quite a bit of money there that would amount to $350,000. And then the EESI payment that we have for energy efficient at the different schools, that's $440,000. If we go ahead and prepay that this year or put it in reserve so we can prepay it out of the fund balance, that would bring us down over $1.8 million if we could do that. And that's, I think, perfectly legal to set up those restricted reserves to where we can still spend the money if we need it, but we don't know that we're gonna need any vehicles.
Right.
So rather than budget $200,000 for vehicles, let's set it aside as a reserve, so in case we do, we'd be able to do that. And that would bring us down closer to $6 million that we would need to balance the budget with from our government.
You said for that restricted,
Yeah, it's a restricted reserve.
restricted reserve.
Yes. And we did that when we, I think, bought the property out at Sullivan Middle School.
Right.
And we've done it for a few other things. We did not do it for the sewer line, I don't think, because I don't think,
We have to have permission to move that money?
You do not have to have any permission. You have authority as the board to restrict it for anything you want to restrict it for. What you have to have is permission to spend it. So if we were to include that in our budget proposal, where you see the $350,000 for fund balance, you would just see restricted for textbooks, $850. You would see restricted for transportation equipment. What did you just say, $350? We could do that. And then if we don't spend it, if we only spend $700,000 on textbooks, then we take $700,000 out of fund balance and put it in there. If we don't buy any equipment for transportation, then you don't have to touch it. It can stay in that reserve.
and we did this, I think we have a restricted account set up for turf replacement
Sure
down
do.
the road, and it's the same concept that, and that restriction comes, I think, from the fund balance money that we have at the end of the year. Should we have more fund balance money at the end of this year, then we set some of that money aside and put it into turf management. Is that right?
Right, the turf was to come out of the undesignated fund balance at the end of each year. If we didn't have that rolling in, then we don't put it in the turf reserve. But if we do, then we write a letter to finance and they restrict it for us.
So the turf does not come out of the fund balance we have here, 15 million. It has to be extra fund balance money we get.
Right, we gotta add to it at the end of the year.
So that's 500,000.
Mm-hmm.
Give or take.
But it would be 500,000 that would be going into that anyway, so you're really not taking away from that 15 million with that 500,000 restriction. If that makes any sense.
Textbooks, transportation equipment and maintenance vehicles, and the EESI debt payoff. And we owe $660,000 on EESI, but that's for this coming year and the following year.
Right.
So we would set aside a restricted account of $660,000, I think, would we not, Ingrid? And just budget then $440,000 for the payment for,
You most certainly could. If you wanted to go ahead and restrict the whole payoff on that, we could just take the 440 out of there for this year and then take the next year part out too. We would just budget the same way we'd do for this year.
Right.
Be great.
that would be my recommendation.
That would lower it another two.
It lowers it to, it'd be 1.8, close to 1.8 that we would be reducing it. This number might be off a little bit, the one I have here. Yeah, I've got, we'd be restricted 1.8, well, $1,860,867 is what I came up with to look at the budget. And I've studied this budget since we got it earlier this week. And I've asked lots of questions too since then. Right now, we're asking for $7,880,000 to balance the budget. And if we do it, if we take out part of the reserves here, we're looking at taking out how the budget 26, 40,
6,019,560.
I come up with $6,140,435. What'd you get? Yeah, you're taking out next year's payment on the ESI, which we can't do. We'd have to take out the 440. That's, somebody does the same thing.
Yeah.
So I think we're close to $6,140,000.
Okay, I got you.
But we're gonna restrict the other part.
So we'd be doing 440 this year?
Yes.
On the EAIS?
Yeah, 440,592, I believe.
Okay,
And
so let me go back to that.
I asked the same question about paying off Kettering School, and Kettering is funded with 3.19 cents, I think, from the county, but it's not in our budget, so it wouldn't help us any to do that. That was an initial thought, if it would help us to get back 3 pennies, which would be over $1 million, $1.5 million, I guess. But the way that loan was set up, we don't recoup that 3.19 cents. It goes back to the county once it's paid off, I believe. But once we pay off the ESI, we're debt-free other than the Kettering project, as far as what we're having responsibility for.
What was the last thing we had done?
EESI.
I mean, after that,
Kettering.
you know what the balance of that is? It ought to be within
It's,
3 or 4 years.
no, I believe it's in starts at 2026, but.
I think it's 2026 and 2027 that we do it,
Right.
that we pay it
It's two
off.
parts, I think.
There were two different QSCAP notes. And I believe the first one pays off in 2026 and the second one pays off in 2027.
And I don't understand that 3.19 pennies that is applied to pay it off, but it goes from the county commission.
From what I understand, and this was well before my time and I don't understand everything very clearly, but from what I understand, those pennies had already been allocated to the school system. And in order to keep that just school money, the school system or school board had to say, we're giving 3.19 cents of our pennies to pay off this debt. So we forfeited or returned 3.19 cents of our property tax allocation so that they could pay that debt. Well, they approve a tax rate every year, so when that gets paid off, if they wanted to, of course, the value of 3.19 cents today versus the value of 3.19 cents in, was it 05 and 06 that we did those?
07, 08, I think. we're all
Could be.
right.
Somewhere right around in there. It's gonna be a whole lot different than it is today, so
That's before my time too. So.
I've never dealt with a debt like that, so I couldn't really tell you how it works. But that's the documentation I could find, is we forfeited 3.19 cents or returned that so that they didn't have to split that with the cities.
And unless the resolution calls for the money to stay with us, it does go back to them, so I don't know what the resolution calls for.
Ingrid, on this, the maintenance of effort test, did they not add in any, where they passed the hotel tax and they passed the liquor by the drink tax? Is that added into any of our budget?
I don't think we recognize any of that revenue. And that document that you have there was actually prepared by the county finance. That's what they gave us for local revenue projections.
Because we should, that was one of the state, that was one of the TCA that says that the schools get a portion of that money if the liquor by the drink passed. So I didn't know.
It's a very good point.
Is that?
Yep.
And that's on the hotels.
Well, the
As
liquor by
well.
the drink, we passed it 2 years ago. We put it on the referendum for the people to vote on and it passed, and
A portion of that is supposed to go to the school.
a portion of that goes to the schools.
I don't think we recognize that.
I haven't seen it come through, but it's a very valid point to ask. And you mentioned that maintenance of effort test. Local revenues were adjusted as expected for the loss of students that we had. It reflects the second step in that maintenance of effort test. Obviously, we wouldn't have passed the first test, which is on totals only. We wouldn't pass that first step, so it had to go to the second step, and per pupil, it does pass. And that's what that maintenance of effort test, I'm assuming, was intended when they sent that to us with local revenues, to prove that it matches that. If they were to put in hotel, motel tax, liquor by the drink, I would assume they would still adjust us to meet that maintenance of effort second step.
And is it Larry Bailey that we asked this question of?
I would think so. He's your finance director.
I'll make note of it and ask.
Go ahead. Can she not answer?
I don't know. Kirsten, do you have any knowledge? Okay. Thank you.
Do you know when that passed?
About 2 years.
It was the last year I was there. 22.
This budget is based on 7,800 students, is that correct?
Yes, I think that's correct. It should tell you on that maintenance of effort document at the bottom. I've got it right here. Let me get out of this and go to
We
that.
don't have that one.
It's right here at the bottom. 7813.
How much?
7813.
It's 2020.
78.
13.
Out of curiosity today, I checked to see what the enrollment was in Kingsport.
Mm-hmm.
And I don't have an exact number, but I think it's about 7,600. Rick, do you know? And just, it was close, right? So for practical purposes, they passed the budget, I think last week, of 98 million ballpark for fewer students than we have here. Just making a point.
Yep.
So it's not out of the realm of
No.
reasonable,
Reasonable.
it's in the market.
More students. Our teachers deserve it
Amen.
just as much as.
And I got the word saved on this, which is our 10%. So you bet they are.
Now the time to do it.
Yeah, you're right.
I may here in just a minute.
Just happen to be
Well,
looking back and heard.
I've got some more information that I'll hand out to board members.
He said, I even know that.
I mean, to Angie's point, I think she saw an article where that's how it was presented to the county commission. Obviously, we know how school systems are funded. I mean, all local sales tax by law have to come back into the county, and 50% has to go to the school systems. The only thing I think is interesting is why would they have a separate line item in the document they prepared for us that has the mixed drinks tax and things like
Because-
that they passed, but then they have,
I
they
think
don't
that
list it out.
tax might be more than the local sales tax. Mixed
Well, on top
drinks.
of the local sales
Yeah.
tax, right. So, but I think you're right, it still needs to be split. It should be coming back to the schools.
It'd have to be.
My point is, they have a line item in their budget specifically for mixed drinks tax.
If that happened in 2020, it's 4
There
years.
could be
that they owe us.
money that,
But they had mixed drinks
It's in
in
the
Kingsport
article
before that,
together.
didn't they?
mhm.
But the
Whatever you've got
resolution,
there, just
or
that
the
he,
county commission, the article was in 2020.
Says 50% sent back, then it's split 50-50 with half going to the county government general fund and the other half going to local school systems based on their proportional share of students. That means that every dollar from the 15% tax, the state would get 50 cents. The county would get 25 cents, and then 25 cents would be split between the three systems. Well, the county, Kingsport, Bristol, and Johnson City.
But wasn't there a different tax that Kingsport cities had to begin with for mixed drinks? And that this one just applied to the establishments outside the city limits, I
The
believe.
county,
So
Would it still have to be split?
I think it does
Yeah.
because, you know, you got county residents,
They'll live.
but we don't get a share of theirs if it's sold in the county, if it's sold in the city, do we? I gave you a chart there with some numbers on it, but I want to call your attention to what is up on the screen. And I'm having trouble
Can we enlarge that area?
reading the bottom, but I want
Sorry.
to call your attention to the bottom of it. This was on the spreadsheet that we got from the finance office. And it basically level would be 34,746,442 projected. That's came from the finance office, saying that that's what our revenue should be. Now, they have given us a little bit more than that revenue this year. But the point that I want to make is, we have not received a cost of living increase in many, many years. I'm talking about as a school system. And what you have before you is a value of what 34 million would be in current dollars, $40,907,415. So if we put a cost of living factor in what they projected here for the 2021, we really should be getting $40,907,415. The difference to that is about $6 million, which just happens to be what we're asking for to balance our budget. We have not received anything, to my knowledge, that deals with cost of living. And we have a cost of living increases for employees. We have cost of living increases for the lights in this building and everything else. I mean, we've all been to the grocery store.
Electricity, water.
Amber back here with Dylan, she has not received any money, I don't think, from the feds. Have you any increases as far as allocations? So, you know, we're stuck still with those numbers, and we'll be pushed this year to break even in school nutrition. And when I first came on the board, we were always in the red, and Amber's done a great job of, she's got a fund balance that will get us through this year, but we've got to look ahead to the future at the cost of living. Something else that I want to point out. Elected constitutional officers receive a raise each year. The law provides for an automatic increase in the minimum salary each year based on the percentage increase given to state employees for that fiscal year.
Great point.
Pardon?
Good point.
And that's under Tennessee Code 8-24-102D. There is a clause in there that says that the salary increases cannot exceed 5%. Last year, I believe, all the elected officers in Sullivan County, and I'm talking about constitutional officers. That means mayor, trustee, property assessor, highway commissioner, and sheriff, I believe, they got 5%. Another point, Social Security recipients receive a COLA every year also. That's a cost of living increase each year. And it's based on an adjustment that comes out, I think, in December. Tennessee school system, government employees who are retired with TCRS benefits, they get a cost of living increase every year based on whatever the CPI is or the cost of living that is published. This year it's 3%. The cost of living for Social Security last year was 3.2%. And if you go back and look at inflation over the last several years, you'll find that we're looking at about 17% total over those years. I've got a chart somewhere that shows it. Give up on the chart.
Take your time. It's there.
I'm sure it's here somewhere. Let me go to my backup notes. 2021, the cost of living was 1.3. 2022 is 5.9. 2023 was 8.7, and in this past year was, they actually called it 24, is 3.2. So that comes to a total of 17.8% that we are behind. And I have information here, dealing with how the price of gasoline has been adjusted, groceries and everything else, but we all know how it's been affected, especially in the last 3 years. So basically, what we're asking the county for is a cost of living increase. Now, the other point that I want to make is elected constitutional officers get a pay raise. It's law. But where does the money come from? It comes from the county. It's an unfunded law that says this is what the salary is, this is what you have to pay. Social Security is a law, and it says you get a cost of living increase. TCRS, basically, it's written into their constitution that says they get a cost of living. Why can we not have a policy locally that says each year we will get a cost of living increase of the budget, and we can know how much we're going to get each year ahead of time, rather than to have to go back and look at the budget itself? I don't know if that would require a law with the state, it probably would, or it could be just a resolution locally. But if we don't do something to deal with the cost of living, we're going to continue to lose teachers and other employees, and when we lose teachers, lots of times we're losing students also. And those are two areas that we've got to look at. The two biggest problems we have right now is decrease in teachers and decrease in students, the numbers. And I'll find the chart in a minute to give out to you that.
While you're looking for that chart, any local school systems, principals and stuff, what kind of comparison could you draw?
It's right now advertised in Bristol. There is a middle school principal position that's open, and the salary is about $3,000 less than what our director of school is making right now. That's at the top end, but that's a middle school principal. We have high school principals, many of them in this area, making more than our director. And Chuck is not complaining about his salary. That's not, he's not mentioning it. I have discussed this with him. But again, if we can't compete with Kingsport and Bristol, we're gonna become just a training ground for them with the new teachers that we hire each year. So we've got to have help on this budget. And by help, it's to the tune of $6 million, which is part of the total raise. But if you go back and look at where it was in 2021, which is up here on the board, and those aren't my numbers, it shows that we should be receiving about $40 million in money. And subtract that from what we're getting, and it's close to 6,000 or $6 million. That's my soapbox.
So what you're saying would apply to a teacher as well. For example, the raise we gave in 2021 of 10 or 11%, and all the raises we've given since then, they're still lost money.
Yes.
And that's not even to take into account that out of their paycheck comes part of their insurance, which, as Ingrid pointed out, increases. And I've actually sat down with some people and saw that when we gave a 2% raise or 3% raise, that they actually brought home less money. And I did that with one of the people on the high end of the pay scale a time or two, a few years back. So I think it's important to point out that every person's dealing with adjusting to inflation and dealing with it in our budget, including our teachers.
That's one of the things that I hear from teachers. They'll say, we appreciate our raise, but all of our insurance and stuff has gone up so sky high. You know, I'm making less now than what I did before I got the raise.
think it's also evident to see in the projects that we've done in the last few years for the, I don't know, for the ESSER money we received, I calculated the price increases, we could have got the same value for about half the money prior to 2020. It's not exactly right, it's just roughly, not every project's the same, but we paid some exorbitant prices for those projects because of the demand and the inflation in the system.
Right now, it takes almost $118 to buy what $100 would buy back in 2020. If you take that down to smaller numbers, $1 costs $1.18 now. And the point I was making on elected constitutional officers and Social Security, TCRS, those are mandates, or they're either a law or an agreement of what has to be done, and each year it doesn't have to be debated. County Commission gets, commissioners gets a salary every year. That salary was set, I believe, at 5% of the mayor's salary. School board members get a salary every year. It's the same as county commissioners. Many years ago, and Sam's in the back of the room, and he probably remembers when it came up for debate, arguments, and everything else, and finally, someone put the formula in and says, when the mayor gets a raise, it's calculated at 5%.
Ours is not 5%, if I may interrupt. Ours is the salary, it may equal 5, but it's the county mayor's salary divided by 12, divided by 24. That's the formula.
I think the newspaper article said 5% back when it was
Well,
published.
They were better at figuring, but that's what it is.
And that's about what it turns out to be. But my point is, it's not argued about each year. You know what it's gonna be. And if we had some type of either law or resolution that says each year, whatever the cost of living is, that will be the increase that the school system will receive from the county. And I'm not talking about the increase from property tax or sales tax, but it would be the total increase from the previous year. And it was maybe help a little bit on the disagreements that are always there. Something that's formalized.
Can I ask a question? Does the mayor get a cost of living raise? The mayor's office?
The mayor's is tied into what the state, whatever the state of Tennessee gives, the Tennessee employees is what the mayor gives. Percentage-wise.
Cost of living.
It's cost of living. The governor's salary, just for your information, there is no formula that calculates the governor's salary. Is determined by the state legislature. I checked on that today, and it currently is at 204, I believe, something like that. But it's not set with the formula. The salary for certain positions are listed as 90% of what the mayor's salary is, or I think there's 2 or 3 positions listed that way. So there's formulas all over the place for many positions. Now, no money goes with it. The state doesn't send any more money in. If the mayor gets an increase, there's no more money comes in. If we get an increase, there's no more money that comes in. But we have a funding formula from the state, TISA, and we can predict what we're gonna get. We don't always agree with them, but we have an idea. So maybe we need to work with our state legislators to try to come up with a way to get a law enacted that would guarantee school systems a percentage, a cost of living percentage. We too often think about that the cost of living just applies to individuals, but it applies to the entire system because we have line items for gas, we have line items for electricity, we have line items for sewer and everything else. So we're moving backwards in some areas, and we've cut about everything we can cut.
It doesn't exclude the government.
Pardon?
It doesn't exclude the government.
No, it does not. And, but that last sheet that I gave you shows the cost of living from another source. It's basically the same type of thing that you see what happens there. And I have said to you all before, when I first started teaching, if I took my salary and put it into an inflation calculator, teachers now would be receiving not hardly what I received then. They'd move back. But there's all kinds of calculators online that you can use, and most of them are pretty accurate. Sorry, Matthew.
Oh, you're good.
My question is, okay, so when we have an increase in our revenue, they decrease our property tax percentage. So if we have a decrease in our revenue, are they going to increase our percentage on our property tax to make up that difference?
You know about sales tax?
Yes.
Well, the law says that we get 50% of the sales tax. I think that's the way that's a state law. And why was it put in? It was put in because there was disagreements over what are we gonna do with the sales tax? Who's gonna get the money? So the law was written so that school systems get 50%. That is shared with Kingsport and Bristol.
A minimum
Minimum
of
50%. There's nothing that keeps the county from giving us all sales tax. Matter of fact, I
Right.
think Washington County did that up until last year, that all the sales tax went toward education. Now, these numbers are estimates that, and right now, everything I'm reading shows that sales tax is starting to flatten out, which concerns me. I think the most recent, there's a graph out there that shows that we've kind of hit a plateau on sales tax.
Well, that was my question. You know, they had decreased the property tax percentage that they were giving us.
repeatedly.
Yes, because our sales tax was up. So since our sales tax is down, are they gonna continue to drop the property tax percentage on us?
How much property tax did we lose last year? $4 million? Do you remember?
I think that's right.
Now, the sales tax was increased,
Right.
property tax was decreased, but I think it was 4 million that we
Because they
lumped out.
equalized it. If we got 4 million in sales tax, then they decrease the property tax by.
Now, 15 years ago, I believe we were getting about 39 million from the county. That was property tax and sales tax together. That may not be exact, but I think it's close to the 39 million. Now, true, our enrollment has dropped. But when you look at the number up here, 4605 per student, I believe is what it says. That is sales tax plus property tax. If you just do it on property tax, it's more like $2,500 is for the property tax.
So Randall, we're getting about 42% of that 50%.
Yes, I think it's 42.4 or 41 point. Are you reading that fast?
Yeah. It's all blurry anyway, so it don't matter if you go slow or fast, it's all blurry. 41.78% is what we get for 23-24. 41.78%.
And last year it was,
42.47%.
Sales tax, yeah. 40 we get up-
If you look at this chart here, you can see how, I'll make it a little bit bigger so you can see it. You can see how we have steadily declined. I came in 2015, we were at 48.2%. Today, we're at 41.7%, so
the year we got the loan, the $140 million loan, what year
Yep.
was that?
2016,
Yep.
What was our share then?
47.35%.
So we lost 6%, city county split,
Mm-hmm.
just that number of years.
and we're very glad we built when we did, because
So-
if we lost 6% now,
With inflation, we'd be building $130 million Westridge with 6%, with 6% less in the split. Because Westridge would, instead of, yeah,
65 million.
we had 67 for our park to begin with, then we put 4.8 for the stadium, and, but the park we borrowed, I mean, it would have been less, and the price of that school now with inflation would be 1/3.
We can put it in the calculator and find out.
I'm going to. Thank you, Ingrid.
But, you know, when we lose students, the electric bill does not go down.
Mm-mm.
The gas bill for buses doesn't go down normally, because you've still got maybe fewer students, but you're still doing your same situation. And many times, teacher salaries don't go down because it depends on where you lose the students. You still have to have the same number.
And isn't it true that Kingsport lost students this year as well?
Yeah. Let's go back here.
They lost 133.
Kingsport lost 138, and the city-county split. This is weighted full-time equivalent of average daily attendance. So this is not actual numbers they lost. This is in that split. They lost 138, we lost 282, and Bristol gained 119.
Is that attributed to the free tuition, or do you know? Possibly.
I'm sure there's a lot of contributing factors to that, but I couldn't say I hadn't looked at those numbers, so I don't know exactly why they gained, but I think it's interesting. We always said, well, you're losing and Kingsport's gaining. Well, that's not the case this year. We both lost.
That's one reason that they went to 4 tuition this year, for this coming year.
Right.
Just to try to regain.
Right.
They didn't go free, but they did drop it down.
Right.
And there is one school in Bristol that does free tuition, I believe, Fairmount. And if you look at the ones that we've lost, a lot of them went to Fairmount. It's on that list that we talked about. We've got to vote on the amendment that I wanted to make those changes.
Pardon?
You got anything?
No, I think Randall summed it up.
Get off the I just want to say, in my opinion, these kids are an investment, period, in my mind. And looking at these numbers, and I appreciate you pulling all this stuff together. It doesn't take somebody with a degree in rocket science to see that, like you say, everything costs more than it did 5 years ago, especially. The inflation, and we're stuck in that rut. To me, I'm here for the kids of this county and for the teachers of this county, period. I don't want to fight with the commission or anything. I just want them to understand that, in my mind, we need this money because I didn't realize what you said about, tell me those numbers about Kingsport, the budget with Kingsport next year and ours.
Kingsport's got about 7,600 students, and their budget, I believe, that was approved was about 98 million.
So Kingsport's got 7,600 students and a $98 million budget.
And
And we've got 7,813 students, right?
yes,
So we're asking for less with more money. We're asking for less money for more kids,
more students,
correct?
more schools.
Is that accurate?
Yes, and we're more spread out. I mean,
More
you look at the
And-
size of,
Yeah, I mean, we got a lot more area to cover. I just think if we can't do something to retain the teachers, retain the students, I agree 100%, we're nothing but a training ground. I've seen it other areas of this county, you hire in brand new, you transfer out to go make more money. I want us to be the best, period, across the board with the teachers and with the students. And in my opinion, it's not too much to ask for that number, that 6 million number. After listening to everything that's been said here today, that's all I got to say.
And add to that the fact that we're required by law to bring all the new teachers up to 50,000.
Right, that's a very good point.
And that in some cases, if we don't move everybody forward, we could have teachers that started out that made more than 9-year teachers.
Correct.
That could pass a teacher with 9 years. And, you know, I've talked to a few people. One of the things I always say is, if you live in Sullivan County, and I do, and I have a lot of property, and my property's worth nothing without really good education, really good police protection, really good roads. And I'd make the same argument for anybody as I'm making for schools in those areas, because I think the investment's a good word. You get a return on that over time. And one of the things we've got over time hasn't been a very good return, because a lot of people have elected to move away and guess what they take with them? Take their kids with them. And I want to make a place where kids can come and live and stay. And, you know, if you look at what's happening in the economy, how'd you like to be a young person buying a house now? And the inflation, which Mr. Jones pointed out, the cost of doing that and moving here, this has become a housing market that's pretty expensive now, even though the wages don't reflect that.
Matt, I will jump on that as well, what you just said. Our teachers deserve the very best because they give 100% of themselves, 100% of the time. And as we know, the majority of educators are not in it for the money to begin with. They're in it because they love kids. Because that's why they work hours beyond when the bell rings in the afternoon. It's why they work on Saturdays, it's why they work on Sundays. And it's why they go to Walmart on the weekends and spend their own money to buy what they want in their classrooms, because they choose to do that. We have always been a training ground in Sullivan County. You can go through the list of teachers in Kingsport and Bristol, and I would be willing to bet that 50% of them started in Sullivan County. So we've been a training ground for a long time. When we put the raise in a couple of years ago, or last year, it really raised the eyebrows of a lot of people. And I felt like we had momentum, and we were gaining more momentum. We've got to keep that momentum going. We've got to give the teachers what they deserve, and the raise is what they deserve. And like Mike said, the $50,000 requirement is coming. We've got to plan for that accordingly. And anyone that has gone to the grocery store, as Randall said, there's no comparison to what it was before the pandemic. Honestly, I don't even know how people are feeding a family of children right now. So it's just unfair for us not to try and give our teachers what they deserve. I think we need to ask for it because that's what they deserve.
I'm going to point out something else that occurs to me is in teachers. This 15% is going to help everyone, but there are departments that we have that 15% is woefully. 15% of not much is not much. I pointed out that we had employees making $21 an hour, $21.50 after 30 years. People with expertise, after 15%, that's less than $25 an hour. You cannot compete, and you cannot get people to work for that. And who wants to? I mean, how do those? I mean, can you imagine, $21.50 an hour? $21.50 an hour wasn't much money before this mess of an inflation hit, and it's, as Randall pointed out, it's much less now. So we have to, even when this is done, and it's gonna be done at some point, now, I know it's gonna be painful for a lot of people, but it's gonna be done at some point. Well, even when this is done, there's work to be done in a lot of departments to make people, to fix our system of where people can live. That's it.
I'd just like to say, I appreciate the opportunity. If we vote for this and pass this tonight, I look forward to the opportunity to take it to the county commission, because I believe after 1 year, everything that you're all saying at this table, I've seen it. I've seen it in action. We have teachers who are having to work second jobs because they're trying to make the ends meet. They shouldn't have to do that. We have some of the best teachers in Sullivan County, and I don't want to see them leave Sullivan County. What they're producing, what they're doing on a daily, you look at the outcomes that we're experiencing with our students, just all the dual enrollment, the college graduates while they're in high school, those things aren't happening by accident. They're happening because of the training and the education they're receiving from our teachers. It is an investment. It's a partnership between us and this county to recruit business and industry to come into Sullivan County. If we don't have the tools to equip our teachers and let them teach our students to that level, business and industry won't be coming to Sullivan County. It is a partnership, and the return on the investment is the outcome that our students are successful and they're sustaining our economy because they're pouring into it with good jobs and they're doing their end of the bargain. But we've got to keep our teachers able to do that. And this is just saying, we see what you're doing, we appreciate you, and I'm fully supportive of our teachers in that. So, thank you for this budget.
The last 6 years that I was on the commission, we gave the county employees anywhere from 2 to 5% cost of living raise every single year without biting an eye. Our school system deserves that too. Not only our teachers, but our employees, our custodians, our maintenance workers. It's hard to keep somebody when they're making $9, $10 an hour out here to mow our lawns. So I'm hoping that the county commission will look at our employees as just important as the county employees.
I make a motion that we approve the budget tonight with the following amendment, that we set up a restricted reserve for textbooks to the tune of $850,000. Another restricted reserve account for transportation equipment and maintenance vehicles together for $350,000. The EESI debt payoff, the amount this year is $440,592, but the total payoff is $660,867. So I made the motion that we set up the reserve for the total payoff, knowing that we're only going to budget $440,592. And if we make that amendment and it passes, then that would leave us with $6,239,743 that we'd be asking for the county commission for. $6,239,743. And Ingrid will put this in her spreadsheet if it passes and double check it to make sure my math was right on it. But that's my recommendation with that amendment.
I'll second that motion, Mr. Chairman.
Motion by Mr. Jones, second by Mr. Hughes. Ready to vote?
Yes.
Mr. Price,
Yes.
Mr. Robinson,
Yes.
Dr. Rouse,
Yes.
Mr. Spivey,
Yes.
Ms. Stanley,
Yes.
Mr. Hughes.
Yes.
Mr. Carter, will you, check with the director or budget director and see, about the hotel motel tax and the liquor by the drink? Because we should be getting some kind of income on that, I feel by state law.
Notes. Mr. Lowe's, do we need to approve the federal and the other two as well?
This shouldn't take 10 minutes to do the next three. We got the big one out of the way first, so we're good to go. And I'll just briefly tell you about federal projects. I tell you this every year, but this is a requirement that we present our federal projects budgets to the county. They can't approve it, they can't say no, because it's just federal, it's federal grants we get. But the state requires that we present that to them so they know what we have in federal grants. What you have before you is only for the applications that are already approved and budgets are already in for. We just received communication last month from the state saying that they had been monitored and they located an error in their funding formula. So our allocations have been adjusted. They were adjusted for 23-24. They're going to be adjusted going forward. So we're in the middle of getting all that cleaned up. Unfortunately, the funding error usually means we get a cut. So they're scrambling. Those that have federal grants are scrambling to get those budgets to get them where we can meet that adjustment. I just told you those are only the approved applications. They're required to be presented to the county commission, but it's no funding from the general purpose fund. It's no funding from the county. It's all federally funded. They are putting in those applications, the 15% increase for all their employees as well. They're also including the insurance increase as well for 5%. So we don't know our firm allocations yet, but once we get those, we'll get that and we'll work with whatever we have to work with as far as increases that we got to do. So those are there. And again, that's just for the county commission to see that for those funding applications. School nutrition budget. In the past, they were not self-supporting in school nutrition. GP had to cover to get them to where they could make it through the year. Now they're fully self-funded. She's included in her proposal, she's included a 15% raise for all of her employees and step increases for all of her employees. She's continuing to see a tremendous amount of increase in food cost. She's absorbed that in her budget, and she's also put a 5% insurance increase in her budget. She's still good. We think with CEP we'll be okay. But if something should tank, if we should have to pay some outlandish increase in food costs, or if for some reason participation drops, she's okay. There's a fund balance there that she could cover it if she has to. But we don't anticipate that. But just in case we need it, it's there. She's okay. We don't give any money to food service. The county doesn't either. It's all self-supporting. And that all is driven off of participation. So if the kids eat, and the higher the participation, the more revenues we have coming in. So we always want to encourage our kids. And we, more than just a revenue piece, we want our kids to be fed because they can't learn if they're not fed. So that's our goal in school nutrition. The last budget you have is Discovery Academy, and that is for our tuition-based pre-K program. That budget is for maximum utilization. We are not at maximum utilization, and we don't plan to be, but if we should be, that budget is there to cover it. It's self-funding. Tuition covers it. It gets no funding from the county or from the general fund. But it would have enough in there to do a 15% increase or to cover health insurance increases if we needed it. And that's all I've got.
I make a motion, we approve those budgets as presented.
Second.
Motion by Mr. Jones and second by Ms. Stanley. Any further discussion on this? Ready to vote? Yes.
Mr. Robinson,
Yes.
Dr. Rouse,
Yes.
Mr. Spivey,
Yes.
Ms. Stanley,
Yes.
Mr. Hughes,
Yes.
Mr. Jones.
Yes. I used the figure a few minutes ago of 5% of the mayor's salary for the calculation. I think it's actually 7%, so I'll double check my notes on that, Rick. But I believe 7% was in the article that was published several years ago.
Anybody got anything else? Motion to adjourn.
Mr. Price.